Okay, so get this.
Okay.
We're going to uncover the story of a political mastermind who's been quietly shaping China's rise for decades.
Yeah.
He's the brains behind its superpower status.
Right.
And now he's turning his attention to Taiwan.
Interesting.
His name is Wang Huning, and from what I'm reading in this New York Times article, he's basically China's ideological architect.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
What's fascinating is that Wang Huning isn't a public figure like you'd expect for someone with this level of influence.
Yep.
He operates from the shadows, but make no mistake, his fingerprints are all over China's political landscape.
It's like he's a ghost in the machine, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of unusual, the article highlights how he rose to power without ever holding a major public office.
Interesting.
This isn't some regional leader climbing the ranks.
Right.
Wang Huning has never led a province or a city.
Right.
But he's advised 3 Chinese leaders in a row.
Wow.
Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao, and now Xi Jinping.
Exactly, which is pretty unheard of.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about his intellect and ability to translate complex ideas into policies that resonate with China's top leadership.
So he's the ultimate power behind the throne.
Yeah, you could say that.
I'm already hooked.
It's a fascinating story.
And what's even more intriguing is that his early academic work was actually focused on Western political traditions.
It's true.
Interesting.
He was deeply interested in Western political thought.
Okay.
And there's evidence that he genuinely saw potential in democracy as a model for China.
Wow, so the guy who's shaping authoritarian China was once a democracy advocate.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, witnessing China's economic struggles in the late 80s, followed by the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, seems to have been a turning point.
Okay.
These events appear to have shifted his perspective.
I see.
He began to believe that what China needed wasn't democracy, but a strong, centralized government.
Okay.
To manage its rapid economic and social transformation.
So he did a complete 180, from studying democracy to designing a system of one-party rule.
You could say that this shift in his thinking led him to advocate for neo-authoritarianism, a concept that emphasizes strong leadership and social control as necessary tools for development.
Can you break that down a bit for me?
Sure.
What does that look like in practice?
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Neo-authoritarianism operates under the assumption that sometimes a society needs a firm hand at the helm to achieve stability and progress.
Got it.
It prioritizes economic growth and national strength, even if it means curtailing individual freedoms.
Okay, so that explains how he ended up where he is, but what about his impact?
Right.
The article calls him the architect of Xi Jinping thought.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
Xi Jinping thought is the political ideology that defines China's current direction.
Okay.
It's essentially Xi Jinping's vision for China's future codified into a set of guiding principles.
And Wang Huning is the brains behind it.
He's considered a key figure in developing and refining those ideas.
Okay.
In essence, Xi Jinping thought emphasizes 3 main points.
Right.
First, it stresses China's resurgence as a global power, aiming to reclaim its historical position on the world stage.
So it's about China becoming #1 again.
Exactly. Second, it calls for tighter control over society and information.
Okay.
This means increased censorship, surveillance, and a crackdown on dissent, all in the name of maintaining stability and social harmony.
And I'm guessing the third point has something to do with the Communist Party.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
The third point is the unwavering emphasis on the Communist Party's absolute leadership.
Got it.
This ensures that the party maintains control over all aspects of Chinese life, from politics and economics to culture and even personal beliefs.
So the key takeaways here are that Xi Jinping thought is about China's return to greatness, tighter control at home, and the party's absolute leadership.
That's a good summary.
Got it.
Yeah.
But what does all of this mean for the average person in China?
For people living in China, Xi Jinping thought translates to a reality where national pride is encouraged. But individual freedoms are increasingly restricted.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off that the party believes is necessary for China's continued rise.
It's a pretty stark contrast to the democratic ideals that Wang Huning initially studied.
It is.
And speaking of contrasting situations,
Yeah.
this brings us to his current focus, Taiwan.
Right.
This self-governing island is a major point of contention.
Absolutely.
And China, under Xi Jinping, has been increasingly assertive in its claims over Taiwan.
And you can see Wang Huning's intellectual fingerprints all over China's Taiwan strategy.
And how does the U.S. factor into all of this? They've been Taiwan's main security guarantor for decades, right?
The U.S. is a crucial player in this geopolitical chess game.
Okay.
They've made it clear that they would oppose any attempt by China to take Taiwan by force.
Okay.
This adds another layer of complexity to the situation, as China has to consider the potential consequences of its actions, not just for Taiwan, but also for its relationship with the U.S.
Okay, so we've got a potential powder keg situation.
It's a delicate situation.
With Taiwan and the U.S. all involved.
Yeah.
What's Wang Huning's approach to navigating this?
From what we can gather from the article and from Taiwanese officials, he's employing a two-pronged approach.
Okay.
On one hand, he's been cultivating relationships with Taiwan's pro-unification opposition party, the Kuomintang, or KMT.
Okay.
It's a way of showing that Beijing is open to dialogue and potential cooperation with those who are more aligned with their vision for unification.
So it's a good cop approach.
Yeah, in a way.
But I have a feeling there's a bad cop side to this strategy too, right?
You're reading my mind.
Okay.
The article, along with reports from Taiwanese security officials, suggests that Wang is also overseeing covert influence campaigns within Taiwan.
Okay.
These campaigns aim to shape public opinion by amplifying messages that are skeptical of American power, critical of Taiwan's current leadership, and more favorable toward mainland China.
It's a classic mix of carrots and sticks,
Yeah.
trying to pull Taiwan closer while also undermining support for its independence.
Right.
But isn't that kind of risky?
It's a risky strategy.
I mean, couldn't that backfire and make people in Taiwan even more resistant to China's influence?
It's definitely a gamble.
Yeah.
But from Wang Huning's perspective, it's a calculated risk worth taking.
Okay.
He's betting that over time, this strategy will weaken Taiwan's resolve and pave the way for reunification on Beijing's terms.
And speaking of reunification on Beijing's terms,
Yes.
it makes me think of one country, two systems.
Right.
The model applied to Hong Kong.
Exactly.
Is that still the plan for Taiwan?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
While Beijing used to insist on one country, two systems for Taiwan, they've recently shifted their language to something more vague, a comprehensive plan.
Comprehensive plan. That sounds intentionally vague.
Exactly. And that vagueness is likely by design.
Okay.
This shift in language is probably a response to the Hong Kong situation, where the one country, two systems model has faced significant challenges and criticism.
So they realized the old playbook wasn't working.
Yeah, they had to adapt.
And now they're trying something new.
It seems...
Oh, it's all very cloak and dagger.
It is quite mysterious.
But I have to say, I'm even more intrigued by Wang Huning now.
He's a fascinating figure.
Who is this guy and what makes him tick?
Right.
I think we need to dig a little deeper into his background and how he became the man he is today.
I agree. To understand where he's going, we need to understand where he came from.
Yeah.
And his story is fascinating, full of twists and turns that ultimately led him to become the architect of China's modern ideology.
Let's do it.
Okay. To really grasp Wang Huning's journey, we have to rewind back to his early years. He grew up, much like Xi Jinping, in a family deeply rooted in the Communist Party. His education took place during the tumultuous Cultural Revolution, a period that undoubtedly shaped his worldview.
Okay, so imagine growing up amidst the chaos of the Cultural Revolution. That had to leave a mark, right? But then, as China started opening up in the late 70s and 80s, he became fascinated by Western political thought. He was studying democracy, even expressing belief in its potential for China. It's a pretty stark contrast.
It is. This is where things get really interesting. The New York Times article we're using for this deep dive mentions a pivotal trip Wang took to the United States in 1988. He spent 6 months traveling, visiting universities, and experiencing American life firsthand.
I'm picturing him in 80s America soaking it all in. This was the Reagan era, booming capitalism, Cold War tensions still simmering. What kind of impressions did he walk away with?
According to the article, it was a mixed bag. He was clearly impressed by America's economic prosperity and technological advancements. But he also observed what he perceived as flaws in the system.
What kind of flaws?
He was troubled by social inequality, political gridlock, and what he saw as a decline in moral values. His own book, titled America Against America, reflects this critical perspective he developed.
So it's almost like the American experience, rather than reinforcing his belief in democracy, actually planted the seeds of doubt.
That seems to be a reasonable interpretation. This experience, coupled with the political upheaval culminating in the Tiananmen Square crackdown back home, appears to have solidified his conviction that Western-style democracy was not the right path for China.
It's fascinating how his personal intellectual evolution mirrors China's broader trajectory in a way. both turning away from democratic ideals towards a more authoritarian approach?
It's a striking parallel. And this highlights an important point. China's current direction isn't solely the product of Xi Jinping's ambitions. It's deeply rooted in an ideological current that Wang Huning has been instrumental in shaping.
So he's not just an advisor whispering in Xi Jinping's ear. He's the architect of a whole way of thinking about China's role in the world. This isn't just about politics, it's about ideology.
That's right. And in China, ideology isn't just some abstract theory. It's used to justify the party's control over every facet of society.
Okay, let's bring this back to Taiwan. We talked about Wang Huning's two-pronged strategy, cultivating the pro-unification opposition and undermining support for the current government. But what does that actually look like in action?
On the relationship-building front, Wang has been actively engaging with members of Taiwan's Kuomintang party. He's met with their delegations, listened to their concerns, and basically tried to present a more conciliatory image, emphasizing Beijing's willingness to cooperate with those who share their vision for unification.
Okay, that's the good cop part. But what about the bad cop tactics? What do these covert influence campaigns actually involve?
This is where things get a bit murky, but the article cites Taiwanese security officials who say these campaigns involve spreading disinformation online, promoting pro-China voices within Taiwan, and generally trying to sow discord and distrust towards the government.
So it's like what we've seen Russia do in other countries, trying to manipulate elections and public opinion?
There are definitely some parallels. It's part of a broader trend we're seeing where authoritarian regimes utilize information warfare as a tool of foreign policy. The goal is to weaken your opponent from the inside, erode public trust, and create societal divisions.
And these tactics can be very effective, especially in the age of social media, where disinformation can spread like wildfire.
Exactly. Democracies around the world are still grappling with how to counter these kinds of information operations.
Given all of this pressure, is reunification with Taiwan inevitable?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. The situation is incredibly complex. But what's important to remember is that despite all of the pressure, Beijing is exerting the majority of Taiwanese people still prefer to maintain their de facto independence. They haven't yielded to China's pressure tactics.
It's a good reminder that amidst all the geopolitical maneuvering, there are real people at the heart of this issue. The people of Taiwan will ultimately determine their own fate.
And that's precisely why understanding Wang Huning's thinking is so crucial. He's the mastermind behind China's strategy. His ideas and calculations about Taiwan will be key to understanding how this situation unfolds in the future. He's a long-game player.
Okay, so given his long-term approach, what are some of the potential scenarios we might see play out?
One possibility is that Beijing continues to ratchet up the pressure on Taiwan. We could see an intensification of military activities around the island, coupled with even more aggressive influence operations.
So wearing down Taiwan's resistance over time.
That's the idea. They might be calculating that eventually the costs of resisting reunification will simply become too high for Taiwan to bear.
But couldn't that backfire? Couldn't pushing too hard simply strengthen Taiwan's resolve to resist?
That's certainly another possibility. It's a delicate balancing act for Beijing push too hard, and they risk provoking a backlash not just from Taiwan, but also from the United States and other regional powers.
Which brings us back to the other major player in this whole drama, the U.S. They've been Taiwan's security guarantor for a long time.
Yeah.
How do you think Wang Huning factors the U.S. into his calculations?
He's a keen observer of American politics and society. He's studied their strengths and weaknesses, and he's likely trying to anticipate how they might react to different scenarios involving Taiwan. It's like a game of multi-dimensional chess trying to outmaneuver not just Taiwan, but also the United States.
So we've got this high-stakes chess match playing out with incredibly high stakes, and in the middle of it all is Wang Huning pulling the strings. You mentioned earlier that he's a master of using language to serve the party's interests. We see this in the shift from one country, two systems to the vaguer, comprehensive plan.
Sure.
What do you make of this change in language?
I think it reflects a recognition on Beijing's part that one country, two systems has lost its appeal, especially after the events in Hong Kong. It's simply no longer a persuasive proposition, even for those in Taiwan who might be open to closer ties with the mainland.
So they needed a new narrative, something that sounds more palatable, even if it's less specific.
Exactly. Comprehensive plan provides a lot of flexibility. It could mean a slightly modified version of one country, two systems, or something else entirely. The ambiguity keeps everyone guessing.
It's classic Wang Huning strategic ambiguity wrapped in ideological packaging. I'm starting to understand why he's considered such a formidable figure.
He's definitely a force to be reckoned with, and this deep dive has only scratched the surface of his complex and fascinating story.
This episode has given us a lot to process. It's clear that there's so much more to learn about this man who's operating behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your perspective, what are the big unanswered questions about Wang Huning? What are the things we still don't know but would love to?
That's a great question. We've uncovered so much about his past, his ideology, and his strategies, but there are still so many layers to this guy.
Yeah. For me, one of the biggest mysteries is how much influence he actually has on Xi Jinping. He's the architect of Xi Jinping thought.
Right.
But does he really shape Xi's decisions on a day-to-day basis?
It's the million-dollar question. Does he push back against certain policies, or is he essentially a yes man? We can speculate. But it's hard to know for sure. The inner workings of the Chinese Communist Party are notoriously opaque.
It really makes you wonder, is he the puppet master or the puppet?
Right.
Another question that I keep coming back to is how Wang views China's future relationship with the West, particularly with the United States.
Okay.
He's clearly a staunch nationalist who believes in China's destiny as a global superpower. But where does the West fit into that vision?
That's a crucial question, and it's one that has profound implications for global stability. We know he spent time in America, studied their systems, and wrote America Against America, which doesn't exactly paint a rosy picture of their relationship.
Yeah.
Does he see a path to coexistence, or is conflict inevitable?
You hit on a major point of tension.
Yeah.
On one hand, we see China engaging in diplomatic efforts, participating in international organizations. On the other hand, we see this assertive foreign policy, the military buildup, the rhetoric about reclaiming China's rightful place.
Exactly. And disentangling Wang Huning's personal views from the official party line is incredibly difficult. His writing suggests a deep skepticism of Western values and intentions. But he's also been involved in high-level diplomacy.
Right.
So perhaps he sees room for both competition and cooperation, a kind of managed rivalry.
And what about Taiwan? Does he genuinely believe that reunification is achievable? Or is this more about maintaining the party's narrative of national unity, even if it's a long shot?
It's hard to say definitively. He's incredibly strategic and calculated in his approach. Remember that shift we talked about?
Yeah.
From one country, two systems to the more ambiguous, comprehensive plan. I think that might offer some clues.
You're right. That really stuck with me. It's as if he recognized that the old playbook wasn't working and decided to change tactics.
Precisely, maybe he's come to realize that Taiwan is a tougher nut to crack than Hong Kong was. The Taiwanese people have a strong sense of their own identity and have shown no real interest in becoming part of mainland China's political system.
So maybe this comprehensive plan is just a way of kicking the can down the road, buying time to devise a new strategy.
That's one interpretation, but it's also possible that it signals a genuine willingness to be more flexible, to consider different models for reunification that might be more appealing to the Taiwanese people.
That would be a significant shift, wouldn't it? It would require Beijing to relinquish some control to accept a degree of autonomy for Taiwan.
Absolutely, it would be a major concession. But remember, Wang Huning is a pragmatist. If he believes that a more nuanced approach is needed to achieve unification, he might be willing to explore those options.
So the big question is, how far is he willing to go? How much is he willing to compromise?
That's the enigma of Wang Huning. He's a master of strategic ambiguity. He keeps his cards close to his chest, operating behind the scenes. One thing is certain, though, his actions, his words, his very way of thinking will have a profound impact on China's future and its relationship with the world.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. We've gone from knowing next to nothing about this shadowy figure to understanding his intellectual journey, his influence on China's ideology, and his strategies on the world stage.
It's been a fascinating exploration. Wang Huning is a figure who demands our attention. He's a master strategist, a shadowy influencer, and ultimately a key to understanding the complexities of China's rise.
Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Wang Huning. It's a complex and ever-evolving story, one that we'll certainly be revisiting as events unfold. We encourage you to continue exploring this topic, do your own research, and draw your own conclusions.
And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this final thought. What if the biggest miscalculation the West has made about China isn't about its economic might or its military ambitions, but about the power of ideas?
That's a powerful idea. To ponder ideas shape the world. And in China, few have shaped more ideas than Wang Huning. Keep your eye on him, keep those minds engaged, and until next time, keep diving deep.